What is magical realism? It sounds like an oxymoron, doesn't it? Two natures that seem to oppose each other, but when put together, form a very peculiar genre. Realism was an artistic movement in the 19th century, where the world began to be portrayed realistically, instead of in a romanticized or idealized manner, the same way that photographs began to show things as they were and not as people wished they were. As a response to realism, magical realism was introduced in the early 20th century. German art critic Franz Roh was the one who coined the term. The literary genre grew in popularity in the 1950s, especially in Latin America. Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude is one of the genre's most known and celebrated works. Although magical realism is a vast genre, containing different authors, languages, and styles, there's an important element that recurs. The story is set in the real world and happens to have magical elements. Unlike The Lord of the Rings, where the story takes place fully inside of a fantasy world, or in Harry Potter, where the two natures are separated and initially provide a certain escapism to the main character. The stories born of this genre are rooted in a world we know, with rules we live by, intermingled with fantasy elements. The supernatural occurrences are treated like any random everyday matter, and avoid explanation. They are normalized. And where the fantastic mirrors the realistic, the end result gives us narratives that feel like modern or adult fairy tales. In today's video, we will be looking at 3 films that fall under the category of magical realism: Border, The Killing of a Sacred Deer, and Tigers Are Not Afraid. We will be delving into what makes them modern fairy tales, and what the blending of real and magical can teach us. As with any of our videos, spoilers will follow. What's interesting with these 3 examples is the way they normalize fantasy by setting the story in modern times, unlike one of the genre's most popular movies, Pan's Labyrinth. Sometimes when we see a period piece, we tend to perceive it as something removed from a reality we understand. Grounding these movies in an era we know brings the story closer to what we can relate to. We start with characters that inhabit our world up until the moment they are faced with an unnatural conflict. Estrella is a normal Mexican girl that attends school at the start of the film, until there's a shooting. She returns home only to realize that her mother is missing. She eventually joins a group of orphans that are trying to survive in a gang-ridden and violent world as she is followed by a ghost. Tina is a Swedish customs agent who lives in a house near the woods along with her boyfriend. She's extremely good at perceiving a person's guilt and is great at stopping people who are trying to sneak contraband across the border.
Skam, skuld, vrede. Annat också, så lägger jag ihop 2 och 2.
One day she meets someone whose intentions she can't read.
Verkar klint.
Han har något på sig.
Är du säker?
Ja.
Stephen is a well-regarded surgeon with an enviable family and home, but he has an increasingly odd relationship with Martin, the son of his former patient.
I'd like you to come by my house one day, to meet my wife and children. I think you'll get along great.
He's been trying to help him out of a sense of pity, but mostly guilt, because he accidentally caused his father's death. When Stephen decides to finally cut ties with Martin, the teenager starts to enact his supernatural vengeance.
That critical moment we both knew would come someday. Here it is. That time is now. You know what I mean.
The collision of worlds doesn't transport the story to a fantasy land. The characters still have to face reality as the fairy tale elements come to add an interesting facet. Even though the origin of the fantastical isn't explained, knowing its basis in mythology can help deepen our understanding on why it's included in the film and what it signifies. In The Killing of a Sacred Deer, the title refers to a story in Greek mythology. There are different versions, so the one we will mention comes from Euripides' Iphigenia at Aulis. Iphigenia was the daughter of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra. Agamemnon accidentally killed a sacred deer that belonged to Artemis, and so, blood was required in return. Iphigenia is meant to be the price of Agamemnon's mistake. The movie is a representation of this tale. Martin's father died on the operating table due to Stephen's irresponsibility. In order to establish a semblance of justice, Martin gives Stephen an impossible choice, along with a set of fairy tale-like rules. He must kill a member of his own family to atone for Martin's father's death. A life for a life. If he doesn't, everyone in Stephen's family will fall ill and eventually die.
1. Paralysis of the limbs. 2. Refusal of food to the point of starvation. 3. Bleeding from the eyes. 4. Death. 1, 2, 3, 4.
He can't kill Martin either, because it'll be like killing his whole family. Director Yorgos Lanthimos decides to heighten the magical atmosphere by using a very stable camera that just floats in and out of rooms following the characters. The unnatural high and low angles give us the feeling that the characters are being observed. They look like small people in large rooms, distorted by the omnipresent stare of the wide-angle lenses. As Colin Farrell stated, it gives us the sense that the gods of the past on Mount Olympus are looking down at the foibles of humans. Fairy tales are an ever-present theme in Tigers Are Not Afraid. As the movie begins, Estrella's teacher asks her students what elements can be found in fairy tales. Once the shooting happens, the teacher gives Estrella chalk and tells her that she has 3 wishes as a way to calm her. Estrella uses her first wish to bring back her mother. It doesn't go the way she expects. Her mother's dead body comes and follows Estrella throughout the film. Initially, she's afraid, but by the end, she comes to understand that her mother and the other dead people are just trying to tell her something. The magical elements are used here as a guide. Everything that occurs is seen through the eyes of the orphans. That's why the camera is usually at their level. Isa Lopez stated that she wanted us to be the 6th child, lurking through the shadows, seeing the world as the other kids do. The focus on the kids is reminiscent of fairy tales involving children amidst a horrible situation. In an interview with author Cornelia Funke, Guillermo del Toro expressed that fairy tales come out of a time of great need. Hansel and Gretel were taken into the woods to die because there was no food. In Tigers Are Not Afraid, Estrella, Shine, and the other children are in a similar situation, but instead of the woods, it's the unforgiving, nameless city they are left in. In Border, the magical element we are introduced to is that of trolls. Tina has grown as a human, but unbeknownst to her, she's one of them. She's not gigantic or stupid, as presented in various Scandinavian folktales. She has passed for a human all her life. She just looks a bit rougher and Neanderthal-like. Same goes for Vor, the person she couldn't read. We also get to see an interpretation of the changeling myth through Vor's actions in the film. In most folktales, trolls are known to steal human unbaptized babies. Vor steals them and replaces them with Hisits. The Hisits are unfertilized troll embryos that can be molded to look like children, so that the parents don't notice when the infants have been swapped, up until the moment when they die. The director Ali Abbasi knew the source material was very fantastical, so he put a lot of effort in aesthetically grounding the story. I deliberately did not want to stylize it. I said if we want to pull off this banality, it can't come across as too deliberate. By stylizing shots, you're signaling to the audience that something special is going on. He was very inspired by the magical realism of Latin American writers. The most important literary device they use is to combine fantasy and realism. To capture life and inner life, you need different layers. This is why the dreams, hallucinations of the characters are as real as their everyday life and part of their reality.
If my husband made a mistake, if out of negligence or I don't know what, he caused this tragic thing to happen, I don't understand why I should have to pay the price. Why my children should have to pay the price.
The mixing of the real and magical compels us to decipher the message beyond the trolls, the godlike powers, and the dead. As with many fairy tales, we have to dig deeper to find the meaning. In Border, the magical elements serve as a way for the main character to reassess her identity. It's mostly a love story, and about Tina choosing who she wants to be, and the experience of being a minority. Anyone can relate to that feeling, where your existence is not given, and you have to abide to rules set by others. The humanity and compassion she's gained from her upbringing clashes with her inborn troll nature. It's nature versus nurture. She considers Vor's actions of stealing babies to be horrifying, but she herself was taken away from her own kind and raised on a lie. She's conflicted with what it is to be human, or what is it to be a monster, uncertain of where her identity lands.
Jag vill inte skada någon. Är det mänskligt att tänka så?
In The Killing of a Sacred Deer, Stephen is a successful heart surgeon. He's held the life of his patients in his hands while operating on them. He's used to being in control. Martin, on the other hand, is not as fortunate as Stephen or his family. He's the one with the least bit of power in this situation. By forcing Stephen to choose someone from his own family to be killed, Martin becomes the one with control. Often in the magical realism genre, the stories that are written are about criticizing the powerful and focusing on the plight of those on the fringes of society. Martin's character fits that narrative. The awkward teen goes from being the one with the least bit of control to the one that holds all the power. There is nothing that Stephen's family can do to reverse the deterioration or to stop Martin.
I don't know if what is happening is fair, but it's the only thing I can think of as close to justice.
It shows that control is an illusion when faced with someone or something outside of our zone of influence. Tigers Are Not Afraid is a film about childhood and what happens when it isn't protected. Estrella, Shine, Tuxi, Pop, and Moro have no one to count on other than themselves. The only adults near them are those who are looking to murder them. The most impactful lesson from the story is that it's real, not the ghosts nor the chalk or the wishes, but the situation the orphans find themselves in. We are presented with the accurate, harsh reality of how the drug trade is felt by children who are orphaned and forced to survive by joining a gang or die trying to escape. It's the real-world horror of what happens when children are separated from their parents and left to fend for themselves.
Se nos olvida quiénes somos cuando las cosas de afuera vienen por nosotros.
Magical realism honestly feels very idiosyncratic to the Latin American perspective, where the supernatural and naturals share the same roof. It is unfortunate that there are misconceptions in regard to fantasy. It is sometimes seen as something to be taken lightly, as mere escapism to avoid reality. There is a romanticized perception of fantasy where it is believed that it's only about happy endings, or that it's a genre exclusively geared towards children, a place where magic saves the day. The 3 films we've looked at show us that magic is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. It complicates things, and it can be used to reveal the true character of the protagonists. Magical realism is a genre that creates a striking contrast that helps us reframe and make sense of reality. It offers an alternative look at a societal or philosophical issue so that we can understand a hidden truth. Thank you for taking the time to watch our video. We invite you to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Today's musical composition was made by Eduardo Gonzalez. If you liked his work, you can find his information in the description below. And also, if you want to contribute to our channel so we can keep making videos like this one, you can take a look at our Patreon page. Until next time.